pleasant day to each and everyone. For today, we will discuss the biologically based factor theory by Hans Eysenck. He was born in Berlin, Germany, and unfortunately, his parents divorced when he was young, and that was when his grandmother raised him. But nihawa pud siya dito sa Germany when the Nazis came to power, and as an active Jewish sympathizer, his life was in danger. He continued his education in England and received his PhD in psychology. And during World War II, he served as a psychologist at an emergency hospital where he did research on the reliability of psychiatric diagnosis. And the results led him to a lifelong antagonism to mainstream clinical psychology. Hans Eysenck is also one of the most prominent psychologists in the history of British psychology. He has also written 75 books and some 700 articles, making him one of the most prolific writers in psychology. Overview of his biologically factor theory. Hans Eysenck developed a factor theory, and ang original ani is the extraversion, introversion, and the neuroticism and stability. Then a third significant factor was added, which he labeled as psychoticism and or superego. Kining tulo ka factors ato ani siyang i-discuss later. He believed that individual differences in people's personalities were biological and not merely psychological. It is because Eysenck proposed a theory of personality based on biological factors, and he argues that individuals inherit a type of nervous system that affects their ability to learn and adapt to the environment. And there are three evidences for biological basis of personality, which includes temperament, behavioral genetics, and brain measure research. Hans Eysenck was primarily interested in what is usually called temperament. It is a biologically based tendency to behave in particular ways from very early in life. Although he is a behaviorist who considers learned habits of great importance, he considers personality differences as growing out of our genetic inheritance. Kining temperament mao ni ang ato ang habitual inclination or mode of emotional responses. Second is the behavioral genetics, kay as what I have said ganina, he considers nga ang personality differences or ang ato ang behavior kay ni grow out of our heredity or genetic inheritance. Then lastly, the brain measure research. It is a biologically aspects of personality are assessed using brain imaging techniques, and ang duha ka techniques nga na-involve ani are the electroencephalography and the functional magnetic resonance imaging. So moving forward, these are the criteria for identifying trait factors, which includes the psychometric evidence, heritability, makes sense from a theoretical view, and possess social relevance. So this is the hierarchy of behavior organization, and kini nga method gigamitan ni siya og statistical technique which he called as factor analysis. So kini nga technique kay nag-extract siya og number of dimensions from large masses of data. For example, if gaan ka og daghan kayong list of adjectives to a large number of people, and for you to rate themselves, na kay raw material for factor analysis. So ang pinakaubos sa model mo ni siya ang gitawag nga specific acts or cognitions. These are the individual behaviors or thoughts that may or may not be characteristic of a person. Kini po also nga gitawag nga specific behavior. And the second level is the habitual acts. Kung kanunay na nimo ginabuhat ang imong mga specific nga behavior, kini siya mahimo nga habit. And then sa third is the trait. It is defined by Eysenck as important semi-permanent personality disposition. If katong imong mga habit kay gibalik-balik na pud nimo, kini siya mahimo na nga trait. Then sa pinakaibabaw, kini siya mo gitawag nga types or superfactors. So it is made up of several interrelated traits. So balik ta ani nga model, kini siya mo gisunod sa mga trait theories. Sa pinakaubos nga part diha nato makita ang atong mga specific behaviors. And then kini nga mga specific behaviors, they can correlate to each other, they can cluster with each other, then kana siya mo form into habits. So nay nakabutang ana, keeps at schoolwork, persists with hobbies, finishes a job, studies alone, and etc. So for example, kining keeps at schoolwork, if imuhang specific behavior kay wakes up early in the morning, answers the given quizzes on time, and review activities, and then kana nga specific behavior mahimo na siyang gitawag nga habit if imuha na siyang balik-balikon. And then kining trait, it is a collection of habits nga atong gibuhat. So kini mao atong mga pattern sa atong behavior. So kini nga mga habit kay mag-correlate sa usag-usa maong mahimo ni siya nga trait. Then kini nga trait pwede na pod mag-correlate sa second degree factors, which are persistence and social shyness. And it will go to the super factor of introversion. So kini mo gigamit nga logic sa mga personality test. Moving forward, there are 3 dimensions of personality nga known jud ani si Hans Eysenck. So kini ang extraversion. So if low level imuhang kuan ang imong test sa extraversion, so ang nasa opposite pole mo ang introversion. And the next is neuroticism. And if low level ang neuroticism, so at the end of the pole adto si stability. And the next is the psychoticism. And if low ang level sa psychoticism, dito sa other pole, kay ma-found si super ego. So, si Hans Eysenck na siya criteria for identifying personality dimension. Kay according to him, if wala ma-explain ng personality factors ang atoang personality, even if significant ang statistical value, ay di gyapon to enough. Mo nang naghimo siya aning mga criteria in order to be considered as legitimate. First, it should have a strong psychometric evidence. So, dapat statistically significant. Second, strong biological base exists for each of his 3 superfactors. So, dapat ang mga factors nga ma-discover kay something that can be passed down from generation to generation. Why? It is because it will suggest a biological basis, which means genetic siya. For example, ang extroversion. If extroverts ang imuhang parents, ikaw pod nga anak nila, you should also be extrovert. Third is, it should make sense theoretically. Dapat na siya aning falsifiability, parsimony, internal consistency, and etc. So, dapat nga naay theory nga mag-explain sa atong mga personality factors. Lastly, it should relate to such social issues. Dinhi na mosod ang question nga, does it explain behavior? Does it explain personality? Like, ang question ni kanang Hans Eysenck nga ang 16 PF ba ni Cattell, nag-explain ba siya sa personality? Although wala man sila nag-away ni Cattell, actually, wala sila direct na relationship, but it is a form of criticism sa mga nauna nga trait theorist. Kay kini si Hans Eysenck manggod, he was an iconoclast, which means he's someone nga mo enjoy attacking sa mga established nga opinion. He was also an eagerly and vigorous critic of the effectiveness of psychotherapy. Si Hans Eysenck, mas na-known siya tungod aning iyahang study sa dimension aning extraversion, neuroticism, and psychoticism. So, we will tackle first the extraversion. By this, he means something very similar to what Jung meant by the same terms. Extroverts are characterized primarily by sociability and impulsiveness. They are very outgoing and loud people, while ang introverts is characterized by traits opposite those of extroverts. So nani ang mga shy, quiet nga mga tao. This dimension too is found in everyone, but the physiological explanation is a bit more complex. The principal differences between extraversion and introversion are not behavioral but rather biological and genetic in nature. Kay mao man ni ang main nga kanang kuan ni Hans Eysenck kining biological and genetic. So cortical arousal is the psychological condition that is largely inherited rather than learned. Ang cortical arousal mo ni siya ang main explanation nganong naay extraversion. So it means nga ang cortex daw sa tao or ang brain sa tao kay naay baseline. So nakabutang ani nga extroverts have a lower level of cortical arousal, that's why they have higher sensory threshold. So kay low man ang iyahang arousal, gusto niya nga stimulate ang iyang cortex. So unsa may buhaton sa mga extrovert nga mga tao? So they will mag sensation seeking, mugawas, mo talk sa laing tao para ma-stimulate nila ang ilang cortex. Mo na ang ginahimo sa mga extroverted people. On the other hand, introverts characterized by a higher level of arousal and have a lower sensory threshold. So introverts are cortically aroused, active ilang brain, very imaginative. So ang tendency kay dili na nila gusto nga dugangan, di na sila kayo makisama sa ubang tao, dili sila socially available. So if makabantay mo, if naay mga social events, dali ra kayo madrain ang mga introverts kay according to Hans Eysenck, ang pag-maintain og cortical arousal kay nag-need og energy. Another example aning extroverts and introverts cortical arousal level. So someone who is extroverted kay na sila good strong inhibition. So for example, if kana sila ma-confronted by a traumatic stimulation such as car crash, ang mga extrovert ang ilahang brain mo inhibit, which means nga mo feel sila numb, and therefore they will remember very little of what happened. So after the car crash, ang extrovert might feel nga na blank out sila during the event and may ask other people to fill them in on what happened. So because they don't feel the full mental impact of the crash, they may be ready to go back to driving the very next day. On the other hand, ang mga introvert kay poor or weak ang ilahang inhibition. So when trauma such as the car crash hits them, ang ilahang brain dili paspas nga mo protect nga in a way nga dili mo shut down. So instead, they are highly alert and learn well and so remember everything that happened during the car crash. So as a result, they are very unlikely to want to drive anytime soon after the crash kay mo lagi to active ang ilahang brain during ato nga panghitabo mong ma-remember nila kung unsa jud ang actual nga pagkahitabo sa car crash. The second dimension of personality is neuroticism. It is a trait that reflects a person's level of emotional stability. Kini neuroticism kay nagtalk ni siya about emotional instability. Kay if taas ang neuroticism, kay mas mahimong emotionally unstable ang usa ka tawo. And if baba or low ang iyahang neuroticism level, it means nga emotionally stable siya. Has a strong hereditary component, and people who have score high on neuroticism have a tendency to overreact emotionally. And dali sila mag-complain if naa sila physical symptoms or like stress, dali sila mag-complain about ana. But it doesn't mean na high ang score sa neuroticism kay dome na sa pagiging emotionally unstable. Na yung mga tao nga even if high ang ilang neuroticism kay they can still function well. Hans Eysenck accepts the diathesis stress model of psychiatric illness. According to this, some people are vulnerable to illness because they have either a genetic or an acquired weakness that predisposes them to an illness. So, people are genetically predisposed to have a psychiatric illness because they have neuroticism. Mas prone and high in neuroticism because of stress. And then, kitang tanan na ay potential nga mahimong neurotic. And then, ang mo-trigger ana is stress. But the way neuroticism manifests will depend on other personality factors. So, ani nga figure, makita nato ang interaction of traits. Makita diri ang neuroticism and extraversion. So si A, introverted at the same time highly neurotic. Kini nga mga tao kay katong mga loner, kanang ilaharang gisarili nila ang ilahang mga emotion, like di sila kaayo mo share sa ubang tao. Si C, taas ang iyang extraversion and neuroticism. Kini may mga tao nga mga papansin or it is their extreme version. Si E, introverted but at the same time stable. Kini mo'y mga tao nga wise and full of wisdom. Then D, introverted but naara sa tunga, and so would B. Most people are average. Tagsara ang nag-extreme nga personality but much better nga i-assess gihapon. The third dimension of personality, according to Hans Eysenck, is psychoticism. It is a personality type that is prone to take risk, might engage in antisocial behaviors, impulsiveness, or nonconformist behavior. So, ang mga psychotic, kini sila may mga tao nga mawadan og touch sa reality, like permi sila mag-hallucinate, they are delusional. Psychoticism implies pagiging lenient sa mga tao. And then, na-involve po diri ang ilang creativity. Ang creativity nga gimen ani is kanang wala sila gasunod kanunay sa society kay naaman sila own nga imagination. And then, like neuroticism, vulnerable sila sa psychotic disorder and ang mo-trigger gihapon ani is kadtong stress. For example, natin makita nga tao nga high ang ilang psychoticism. Then, nay maabot nga tragedy sa ilang life. So, most probably, nga makita na lang nato siya nga mawala na siya sa iyang usual self. Nga, kanang permi na sila sila ka istorya or na sila gipang singhagan nga dili na to makita. Ang kini pud mga high scorers sa psychoticism kay prone to schizophrenia. Then mauni ang mga gipanggamit ni Eysenck to measure personality. So first, Maudsley's personality inventory. Second, the Eysenck personality inventory. Third, the Eysenck personality questionnaire. And the fourth, Eysenck personality questionnaire revised. So, biological basis of personality. Researchers like McRae and Alec have found nearly identical factors in people in various parts of the world. Second, McRae and Costa suggest that individuals tend to maintain their position over time on the different dimensions of personality. Third, the studies of twins by Eysenck shows a higher concordance between identical twins than between same-gender fraternal twins were together. Makita nato ani nga figure ang overall theory of Hans Eysenck na diri ang 5 components. So, influenced by distal antecedent, which means sa layo nga mga causes, and ang first cause ng personality is genetic. Most likely, ang personality sa atong parents kay makuha po nato as their mga anak. So, mao nang naay ginakabutang dira nga DNA. Then, it will go to the limbic system arousal. Kini ang mo determine sa atong psychometric trait constellation. Then, syempre, ang trait kay mo interact sa atong environment. Ang environment kay naay conditioning if naka-remember mo ni Ivan Pavlov and P.F. Skinner nga if ma-rewarda ng atong creativity like i-praise sa mga tao, so na-condition ta din the more na mag-exacerbate. Then, ang distal consequences is a collection of personality kay mugawa sa social aspect. Example here sa Philippines, like daghan ang close-minded, so ang tendency kay mas mo-believe ang mga tao sa kung kinsa ang naay authority. Kung mas ahead, kung example, kung kinsa pa tong mas tiguwang, automatic nga sila ang sakto. Nga na ang atong nakuan sa atong society. Nga na ang upbringing nato kay almost all of us have the psychometric trait constellation of having low psychoticism. So as we can see, mura gipakita ni Hans Eysenck nga ang tao maoy nag-influence sa society. Kay kini man gud si Hans Eysenck, gusto siya mataas iyang level ba nga gusto siya nga permis siya nga sakto. Like akong na-mention ganina kay he was an iconoclast nga mo enjoy pa siya attacking sa mga opinions sa ubang tao. We can't blame him kay bright man gud pud siya. So he is also a hardcore behaviorist nga he felt that only the scientific method as he understood it could give us an accurate understanding of human beings. And as a statistician, he felt that mathematical methods were essential. And as a physiologically oriented psychologist, he felt that physiological explanations were the only valid ones.